Hey everyone, Felix from Nintendo Life here, and welcome to the first episode in a new series where we look at games from two different points of view. This meaning that we sit down a veteran and a newcomer about a particular game, and they just get to talk about it sectioned up in 5 different categories. The first game we'll be chatting about in this series is Super Mario RPG. I myself will be the newcomer since I literally yesterday finished the game for the very first time, and for the veteran we have a very special guest who've grown up with this game, played it many times, and he was so intrigued by it that he wanted to see what was beyond the boundaries. It's Shesez, and you are what could be considered as a Super Mario RPG veteran, isn't that right?
I guess you would say that, yeah. I grew up with the game, and I've been playing it annually since, and up all the way until the remake's release.
Yeah, so I think you're a perfect candidate to be the first veteran of this series. Now, the way this will work is that we'll both just chat through these 5 different categories, and each category will have 2 related subjects. The first is reception and popularity, then comes gameplay and controls, then we talk about visuals and performance, sound and music, and lastly, we'll have some spoiler territory, we'll have story and characters. And when all that is discussed, we'll have a conclusion in the end, like who's the best audience, the veterans or the newcomers. So yeah, let's just jump into the very first topic, the reception and popularity. Now, I myself wasn't around when this game came out, but you, Shesez, played it growing up.
Yeah, that's right. So as far as popularity and reception goes, it wasn't like a schoolyard game. There wasn't a lot of kids talking about it. But in my close neighborhoods with, hardcore gamer people, it got its circulation around then. But I wouldn't say it was one of those like commercially or just like a culturally popular games. And a lot of games back then didn't really manage to grab that title because I would say that gaming was still back then, either you're like a nerdy gamer or you've played maybe Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. But Mario RPG kind of sits in this area where not a lot of casual gaming people back then were playing it, but the tight crew of people that would play every single Nintendo release would say, you have to play this.
And what is that? It was pretty popular. At least people now say that it's really good. So how was like back then? Did people also just immediately say like this was a masterpiece, or did it take a bit to like get that cult following?
I mean, I think that anybody who has played it would say that it was an incredible game. One of the things that kind of set it above the competition at the time was that it used that 3D graphics, sort of pixelated style like Donkey Kong Country sort of had. And so back then, before the N64 even came out, the visual style was just really impressive. And I mean, it doesn't look great on the HD TV, which is why the remake is so special, or so needed, I should say. But on an old CRT TV, like, yeah, it really looked amazing back then.
It is incredible how much the CRT stuff like improves older games. So I recently played through Zelda Ocarina of Time, and the sharp polygons, they haven't aged the best. But then in my editing software I put over like a vintage filter where you could make it look like a TV, and suddenly all those rigid edges, they just looked smooth and it just looked so much better. So yeah, I wish I had a TV like that so I can experience it.
Absolutely. You just don't want to carry one into your house, trust me.
But this game is a bit unique because it's gotten a re-release, a full-blown remake, and so the reception and popularity when this was coming out was incredible, to say the least.
Yeah, it certainly did have, I mean, social media is such a wonderful tool for marketing things these days, because I'd still say there wasn't really like any television commercials for this release, which was a bit of a strange choice given that it's Mario and it's their holiday release. But I mean, everybody's a buzz on things like Twitter and Facebook and all that other stuff. So, I feel like the gaming community is really kind of pushing this one out, which is, again, a stark contrast to, what was it, 1996 that it came out?
Yeah, 1996.
Yeah. There's a much better vessel for word of mouth today than there was back then. So,
for certain,
the buzz is a buzzin'.
The buzz is a buzzin', and so is the controller when we are jumping on those enemies. So let's talk about the controls and, of course, also the gameplay of this game. Now, I think this holds up incredibly well for today's standards. Now I know that this is a remake, but it feels like an old game, but it's still like modernized, so it doesn't. I think they nailed it.
Good. You know, I was curious about this especially, was as far as the remake goes, how old does it feel to you, knowing that it's got like this visual polish that, I mean, honestly, like it looks really good for just a general Switch game, not even just a game that was remade into something to look nicer. Like the lighting and everything, like I'm over here just mouth agape when I see like the water sort of like gleaming off of like cave walls and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like that is really impressive. But I was gonna ask, as far as controls go, you felt that if the controls felt really tight?
I thought the controls were brilliant because, of course, you have the 4 directions that you go, but you can actually go in every direction, but it kind of snaps to those 4 directions, and I think they just fine-tweaked it really, really well here. And, you know, the gameplay, you have the sections where you're in towns talking to NPCs, and then, of course, you also have loads and loads of battles, but these battles were really fun, and there's a key change they made here that I just thought, like, I would have struggled without that feature, and it's switching out party members. So how do you feel about this one?
I think that it does inherently make the game a little bit easier, but I don't find really a problem with that with RPGs in general, and I do find myself really enjoying it. So, you know, where I would have probably, you know, tasted dirt on a certain boss fight, instead, you know, a character gets swapped in, and I'm all for it. I love that. And it allows me to utilize characters that I wouldn't normally think to even use in the game.
Yeah.
You know, because my main team was primarily Gino and Mallow for this run. But once they, you know, they tanked, you brought in Princess Peach and Bowser, who are also, I don't know if this is the case with the original game, but they, at least in this release, for sure, everyone's leveling up at the same time with the same amount of experience points. And so they're all competent characters at any given moment, which is nice to experience. So I, for one, love that. I also personally do appreciate the little exclamation point when you're supposed to do a timed hit.
Yeah.
Because in the original release, you did have to kind of feel around the dark at certain times with certain moves or certain enemy moves. And like, honestly, for this remake and seeing the exclamation point show up at certain times, I realized that playing the original game, I never hit that timed mark ever on certain stuff. The visual cues weren't quite there, so I really appreciate that the remake would go through the trouble of adding that. I know that not everybody feels that way. They think that that's part of the challenge, but for me, I mean, just still hitting those timed hits in general is, in my opinion, part of the challenge, and the game really does kind of have a heavy expectation on the player to hit those marks, like I would say 70% of the time.
Yeah, they go away once you like start to perfect them, which is a really nice touch. So it's not like they're always there. They're just there to help you, and then you get the feel of things. My party was, I always had Peach in there because she's just so good at healing. Like, I would just always be healing, like, heal the group, come on, let's do it. And then I just really liked switching around because that meant that I used every single character. I loved using Gino for big damage on all the enemies. I loved having Mallow for like seeing what weaknesses the enemies has and how much they have left. And then Bowser, he's just an overall tank. So yeah, that's the thing I really love about this. We'll talk more about the characters, but just the variety of, you know, different characters that you have in your party, and they can do different things in battle. I think it works really well together.
Yeah, essential RPG element for sure, and each character really does shine in their own way. And I mean, I'm sure you played enough RPGs to understand that sometimes there's not a lot of focus on that, or sometimes it's incredibly unbalanced and you find yourself having to pick certain characters just to muscle through the game. But with Mario RPG, it really does just sort of say, like, this is the role that this character plays. Is that something you find yourself interested in to get through your experience? And there's no wrong party formation with Mario RPG. So I love that about the series, and I'm glad to hear it sounds like, at least from your end, that that aspect kind of holds up for a modern gamer.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now, I'm the kind of person that I like turn-based RPGs, but sometimes they can just be very, very hard. And I'm not the biggest fan of hard games because I just feel like, you know, I'm just using a lot of time and then I die. I feel like I've just wasted my time a bit. But with this one, I felt it was, they really, you know, they perfected the difficulty, at least for me, because sometimes it was a bit tough. and I did die, a few times in there, but it was just like, oh yes, I just won that battle, which was really nice.
No, absolutely. And to kind of pivot for a second too, because I worry that we won't even get to touch on it. The bestiary for this game is
yes,
a great addition. With Mallow's ability to read enemies' thoughts, that was a nice quirk in the original game. But there was nothing to track which enemies you've done that with. Whereas with this one, there's like a little check mark, and you're able to recite what the enemy was thinking if you use that ability on that enemy. And I love that. It just gave you another reason to just another completionist goal for a game that has a lot of completionist goals, like hitting every single hidden chest or getting 99 jumps or aspects like that. So it's a nice, very welcome addition to an already great game, in my opinion.
Definitely. I didn't know that they stored like the weaknesses and stuff. I knew there was a section to see all the enemies, so that's really good to know. But now, going from the gameplay and controls, let's talk about the visuals and performance, because to me those are a very, very big highlight of this remake, and just the game in general. It's so pretty. As you said earlier, the colors just pop, and it runs really well for the most part. Now, there are certain sections where the frame rate drops a little bit, like in the ocean. I noticed it most prominently, but otherwise it was butter smooth. It was really, really, like, I was impressed of how well it did.
Yeah, I was very impressed too. I'm a person that believes that if you can have a game run at 60 FPS, 1080p, and it is like performing pretty well almost all the time, then I'm happy. Like, obviously you would love for it to be 100%, no frame drops ever. I think that a lot of people have that standard, but for me, I would much prefer to have the couple of frame drops that I saw here and there over just sitting it down at 30 frames per second or 720p on the screen or something like that. I really appreciate that they pushed it as hard as they could go. And yeah, I mean, visually speaking, it's so gorgeous. Honestly, these developers, they genuinely cared to bring a lot of the conceptual art as well as restoring the original art and making it look as accurate as humanly possible, while also just sort of adding just little tinges of improvements that just sort of immerse you better into the environment. I love that aspect. I'm so glad there wasn't some sort of radical change to the visual style that the original game was going for. And, the only thing that is inherently different is stuff that Nintendo probably set a mandate for, which that's okay. At first it was sort of like, oh, wow, that's an interesting thing to see that there's a gray thwomp instead of the original blue one. But it's not, at the end of the day, it's like, if that's what it takes to have this remake be a reality, totally fine with it. There's only like, and I could be called out in the comments for this one, but I think there's like one or two little things where it's like, okay, it lost a little bit of its charm because of what probably Nintendo put forward. Like, there's some Shy Guys in the game that can get dizzy, and they have a cool, like, swirly eyes on their face in the original game, but for this remake, they had to keep the Shy Guys' faces looking like Shy Guy faces with the swirly confusion thing on the outside of the body. That's fine. It's not like, that's not even a nitpick. It's just sort of like a interesting thing to look at and say like, oh, it's clear like this game had some mandates, and it's just kind of interesting to look at and just see how it compares and contrasts to a even looser Nintendo back in 1996.
See, that's why it's awesome to have you here to spot those differences, because I would have never, I haven't played the original, unfortunately, because I just don't have I don't have a console to play it on, and it isn't on NSO. So I was also just really, really pleased that it was now, they were bringing it to the Switch, and Sion was really kind to record some footage of the SNES, because we did like a comparison video, and oh my god, it is just such a big improvements. Now, I know I didn't have the CRT filter on, and it still holds up really well, but like those blue voids and stuff kind of take me like out of the immersion, I think, at least today it would. So it was just really nice that in the remake, all those, it's just full lush environments, and
yes.
The world map also, that was a really big upgrade.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, what's funny is that back in the day, those like blue voids and everything, you kind of like relegated and forgave it and said like, okay, I think it's like the style that they're going for is that it's almost like they've set up a diorama or something like that.
Yeah.
But having like those backgrounds added in the remake, you realize there's no going back at this point. Like that's superior in every single conceivable way. Anyone that misses the blue voids, there's got to be just too much of a
one
purity
person
thing going
sitting
on.
there. Give them back.
Yeah. We got to mod it in. What was you said the world map? Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that the world map too it's so I'm so happy with the world map because it signifies how much care and attention these developers have to making it look as accurate as possible without it looking like it's crunched down to 240p. So I look at like the stone that makes up Bowser's face underneath his castle, and it just has that sort of like silicon graphics look to it with the textures and everything. And I love that. You know, it is its own style, whether people realized it or not. So to kind of see that these developers are doing something to at least somewhat mimic that visual flair, I love to see it. Like the Donkey Kong ripoff character straight up looks like a Donkey Kong promotional render from 1996. It's amazing.
They completely nailed the art style with the models of the characters. Mario does look different than normally, but it perfectly mimics how it looked back in 1996.
Yeah. Well, hey, I got a question for you, actually.
Yeah, sure.
So,
ask ahead.
So as far as cutscenes go, where, you know, they're pantomiming and they're doing a lot of visual humor.
Oh, yes.
How well does that hold up in 2023? Because I know this is like your first time playing it, so.
I thought they worked like really, really well. It didn't even occur to me that Mario didn't have a voice until a couple of hours in. It was really funny, and I thought they were paced like really well. And yeah, I thought they worked really well because it was so original in a sense. I hadn't really seen that in any games like that. Mario transforms into other characters and walks on the air to signify that he is on a bridge that has fallen. So it's just, yeah. Now, I have seen complaints that it doesn't really have the same charm as like the original. So yeah, I think you're a pretty good person to ask that.
Well, you know, it's funny because back in 1996 when this was all going down, like there wasn't a lot of RPGs that went to that extent with their character animations to kind of have that level of visual goofs and gaffs. And so I personally always looked at Mario RPG as going above and beyond with its animations for 1996. But then, you know, translating that to 2023 and selling it as a $60 game, I'm still impressed by it because I still hold a flame for the original game. And so, like, it was very interesting to me to know what people might have thought of that literally just being translated from the original Super Nintendo game to this updated Switch version. So, but so as far as you feel, you think that it still holds up really, really well?
Oh, yeah, I definitely think it holds up perfectly. And I think that they converted into also perfection is the sound and music. Oh, what a segue.
The developers really knew when to do sound effects from the original game and then update the sound effects for certain enemies or certain scenes and all that. There was just certain times where, here's the best example for you, Felix.
Oh, nice.
The entirety of Bowser has the updated Bowser voiceover. So, you know, you got the kind of deal. And it's great. And, you know, I don't think too much is lost by not having the original Super Nintendo sound effects for Bowser. However, Princess Peach has this great sound effect when, like, Mario's doing, like, the whole, hey, this is what happened so far, and he transforms into Princess Peach, and you hear Peach in the original game go, woo, woo, woo.
Yes.
You know? And that's the exact same sound effect from the original game, and, like, something would have been lost if they had not used that sound effect. So a big kudos to the developers for, again, it's a blend, but they definitely knew what was iconic sound effects and what wasn't. And I was just completely impressed all the way to the end of the game.
I didn't even know they had done this with the sound effects. I thought they were all just new, but it's really nice to see that they kept some of the good originals in there. But enough about the sound effects. How well do you think they translated the music into modernization?
I think that it's really, really good. I will say, though, that there is definitely still a value to switching to the classic soundtrack and listening to that if you're a new player. I say this because I wouldn't say it's not a restoration of the soundtrack from the original game. It's a remix. So there's a lot of, it's arranged a little differently. And, you know, there's definitely going to be opinions about which songs are better than others. But I would say that across the board, all the songs in the remake are amazing, and you could easily go through the entire sitting with just listening to the remix music. For the original game, though, there's definitely like some things where there's like a more intended sound for just a few tracks that I was like, okay, well, the remixed one is still very fun and nice to listen to, but there's something a little bit lost with this particular track or that particular track.
I had that experience like when you complete a battle, the I actually prefer the original. I feel like the remix version is a bit too much in a sense, where the other one is just like, hey, we won. The other one is like, you won, let's go.
Yeah.
So it's very like in your face, and it's very loud. So it's just...
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that song in particular. My partner, you know, she was just kind of sitting with me while I was finishing off the game. And at a certain point, she was like, ah, man, how many level ups do you got there? Because I'm getting tired of this song. And I was like, I can't get enough of it because I'm just getting the gains. I'm getting all the way to level 30. So,
but other than that, I think like because I went back and listened to some of the originals. Now I did know some of the songs because it is a really iconic soundtrack. But you know, going in and switching from the original soundtrack to the modernized version. Now I myself am very much into music and like how's it made and that stuff. So just hearing how they converted all the songs into you know, the modern age, you know, the harbor town. It was just really fun going back because I didn't know the original track, so I went into the settings and then heard the original, and you know, they just nail the vibes that the songs were trying to get, and it makes sense because it's the same composer who's, you know, remixed these songs. So yeah,
and she's a brilliant composer. Yes, I had no idea until I think probably like 2020, honestly, that the composer for Kingdom Hearts was also the composer for Super Mario RPG, which was also the composer for Street Fighter 2.
Man, talk about like a good legacy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Overall, I think they did really well with the sound and music. Now we'll be moving on to the last category, which is story and characters. Now this will be a bit more spoilery, so if you haven't played the game, I don't know what you're still doing at this point, but you should probably click off the video. So now we are past the point of no return. Let's talk about the story and characters, because we have a lot to discuss, she says.
Yes, let's do it.
So I was immediately really surprised about how funny this game is. Now I've played loads of RPGs and they're not always to this wackiness, you know, Toad talking about a bazooka and Mario about to... Yeah, he's about to hit someone. And it's really cool that they kept so much of it in, because it's like, oh, you don't see that from Nintendo these days.
Yeah, there's only some slight changes to the script because the original localizer, Ted Woolsey, really took a lot of liberties with this one. And believe it or not, before we went into getting this game, there's a little bit of media showing off like some characters and stuff. And we saw some character name changes, like Yuridovich was Spiridovich in this one, which that makes complete sense to change because they're supposed to be weapon-based bosses. And I will tell you that as a person who played the game back in the day, it was a little hard to follow that the theme of this army was all weapons because, you know, they're crunched down sprites. And instead of calling, what's the name of the first boss inside of Princess Peach's castle? Do you remember what his name was?
The new name is Clay Morton.
Clay Morton, yeah. And in the original game, it's just Mac.
Yes.
So it doesn't really kind of convey what he's supposed to be. A lot of people didn't even know that that was just a giant dagger that a character was jumping on and stuff like that. And Yuridovich, I mean, like, I think that it's kind of still holding itself close to the original Japanese name, because I think Yari may be a Japanese weapon. I'm probably going to territory where you're going to get corrected in the comments, but Spiridovich makes a lot more sense as a translated name for sure.
Definitely.
So love that, but it gave me the wrong impression. I thought that we were going to get a more accurate translation in this localization. And in truth, a lot of Ted Woolsey's original script kind of remains unchanged. There is moments here and there that the story gets a slight change in dialogue. Sometimes it's just to remove pop culture references, like, for example, before you fight the Bow Boss, Mario's going in to help Gino, and Mal stops him and goes, who do you think you are, Bruce Lee? And obviously that got gutted out, and that's fine. That makes sense. But the bazooka comment, that's actually not in the original Japanese script. That was a Ted Woolseyism, as some people like to call it. And Nintendo obviously saw the charm in that and left it in the game, which thank goodness, because clearly years later, here you are playing it for the first time and it left an impact on you, just like it did to all of us in 1996. Like when there was lots of discussions about the idea of putting Toad in Super Smash Brothers, one of those suggestions was to make Toad have a bazooka that he left behind in Super Mario RPG. So I'm glad.
That.
Yeah, I'm so glad that they kept that in, and it really does. It complements the slapstick sort of theme and pacing of this game, or just like, you know, the way that they try to tell this story. It's a more lighthearted adventure, and I'm so glad that it is. It's a Mario game at the end of the day. But the thing that makes Mario RPG so special to me is that it does sort of intertwine this idea of original ideas while also having a huge reverence for Mario at the time.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
A lot of us that played Super Mario RPG back then thought that this was expanded and sort of explained Mario lore, which we learned very soon afterwards was not the case. It was a very strange spin-off that a lot of people these days look at and says it's a quirky, very different Mario game. So it's kind of cool to see how people perceive it today versus back then, because yeah, back then we thought we were learning about the Mario universe, but in truth, it was a huge departure.
That's really interesting. When you see it, like in hindsight, of course, like you have all the modern Mario and it's like, oh, they were going nowhere. But at the time, it was like, yeah, they could have gone like a very, very different route. It's interesting to think what could have been.
Yeah, I do like to think that there's a little bit of influence that this game put on Bowser going forward. Tell me if you feel any differently, but I feel like this is like the first time that they kind of gave Bowser his voice, and he was able to express himself a lot more. And I kind of feel like this is the Bowser that we know in future Mario games, especially like I would say Mario and Luigi series.
Yeah. He has so much character. He's really funny, and he has like anger issues where he gets really angry, but he's also very loving, you know, with his minions and stuff. So it's just, I loved Bowser in this game, and
he's a highlight.
Yeah, and what I also just loved is how the story is just so tightly packed with so much stuff. There's never like a moment to waste. It's always something new, a new location, new characters, new type of gameplay. It was just, you know, the adventure, I finished it in 14 hours, but I felt it was much longer because there was just always something happening on my screen that kept me go, wow, this game just has more up its sleeve. And, you know, right to the last moment, because when we see Smithy, you know, it was just like, wow, this is not what I expected. I expected like some overly evil, you know, person. Then it's just like, oh, I'm just a guy, you know, smithing weapons. I don't know. It's just really funny.
Yeah, he does kind of just seem like a blacksmith that just sort of got walked in on or something like that. It's very interesting.
But man, his second phase is really, really like, whoa, that is kind of trippy and a bit scary.
They just don't make them like they used to, man. Like that is some 1996 last boss stuff right there. That's Gygas from Earthbound type stuff. Like that. It's so great that like there's just sort of like it's just on the line of almost being disturbing. Like you could easily scare a small child with Smithy in his last form with those beady red eyes and everything.
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
So I have a question for you. Well, it's more like I was wondering, because the original game, it was a bit longer. It was like 19 hours, where it seems like they've just, you know, made it more compact. And I, of course, don't know which sections have been cut or maybe just trimmed a bit. So I thought you were a pretty good candidate to tell us about it.
I don't think that there's anything cut. So that's the thing that I don't quite understand either. Yeah, I got through it a little bit quicker. It might just be that the battles are paced a little bit faster. That's probably where it's at, because you have all these tools at your disposal to wipe out enemies, you know, in a more effective way than you would in the original game. and maybe the animations for the battle scenes are just a little bit slower in the original game, and it just starts to add up. But there's no cut content, I can tell you that much. Like, everything's there.
Well, that's great to know. I mean, battling is where most of the gameplay is, so if they just made it like 10 or 20% faster, then it quickly racks up. So yeah, I was just really happy because I mean, I do like long games, but I'm playing through Persona 5 right now, and it's just so long. I'm like 100 hours in, and I now reach like the royal territory, so it's like, wow, it's so long. So it's just really nice to sit down with this and then suddenly, oh, it's done. And what an amazing adventure it was. But yeah, we've talked a bit about Bowser. Let's talk about Geno and Mallow, because I think the conversation is really interesting, because we've heard so much of people talking about Geno and Smash, and then we play the game and it's like, that was very underwhelming.
You know, that is really funny, because yes, I am seeing a lot of people coming into this game for the first time and just being underwhelmed by Geno. And to be honest, I was too in 1996, me personally. But I think what was exciting was there was a movement of people pushing the idea of a Super Mario RPG rep into Smash Brothers. And so even though Geno wasn't my number one when I played the original game, there was just this fun idea of having Geno from a great game be repped in Super Smash Brothers. And I looking into it, I will say that, of course, I think Mallow is the stronger character of the two, personality-wise. Yes. But also, if I was to pick one to play in Super Smash Brothers, I do think that Geno would be a more interesting fighter.
The thing with Geno is that he has such a cool design, like with the way he transforms his tree limbs, and he just looks so badass. It's mostly just from a personality wise. He's not very involved in the story. I mean, sure, he needs to get the stars to the Star Road, but otherwise he doesn't really say that much. Where Mallow has this he's so prominent, has such a strong personality, and yeah, he ended up winning my heart in the end, which I was really surprised about, because I'd not heard about this character. Where Geno, it was like, oh, put Geno in Smash, put Geno in Smash.
Yes, so, exactly.
It was just really, really fascinating.
Here's one really funny thing. I guarantee most people don't have the same experience as me with this, but because I was so young when I played Super Mario RPG, and also there wasn't a lot of Nintendo or Mario related media as we do today, when we get to the part of the game where Mallow says, oh yeah, I'm a frog or a tadpole, I just believed it, because I didn't know what a tadpole was supposed to look like visually in the world of Super Mario RPG. And so, when he's told that he's not actually a frog, that was a genuine plot twist to me, like in 1996. But honestly, that
is one of the best moments, because it says in the game, but he does look really weird, which I just thought, yeah, he does. But it's fun that the game is acknowledging this, and then later it's played up in this sense, and it has its own song with the sad piano, which is really cool. That's where it's from. Yeah, it's just a brilliant bit, and I really thought it was fun.
To go back to Geno too, one of the things that I was a little surprised by, and I can't say that I disagree with the developers' take on this, but at the same time too, I was not under the same impression, I suppose. With Geno, his facial expressions don't often change in the remake, and in the original game, I wouldn't say there was a bunch of expression changes, but he utilizes every single one of the expressions that each character gets throughout the game. So the laughing and the mad and all that other stuff. So when it came down to making these cutscenes for Geno, he's always just sort of neutral in the face. And I was a little bit surprised that they went that route. I get the idea. It's that he's a wooden doll, and so they're just going to kind of play up the fact that he's a wooden doll and, visually get that across in cutscene to cutscene. But I was expecting a little bit more, when he smacks himself in the table, for example, when you get first introduced to him. I expected more a winced look on his face or something like that, but we didn't really quite get that. It was just supposed to be kind of almost like a star person in a doll suit almost.
That's really interesting, because I definitely did notice that he was very monotone in his face. So yeah, maybe that has something to do why people think he is he's just a bit serious. He doesn't say say that much, but I love the origin of it's just like this random doll that this kid has in this town, and it gets, you know, the spirit comes down and takes over the doll, which it's very Pinocchio-esque, but it's still very, very cool, and just such a cool original design. That has Gino been in other games since then? Because I don't know.
Not really. So he's been a cameo in Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. There's like a mini game that you get to play, and he just sort of like shows up on the side of the screen in doll form, essentially. So he's not like doesn't walk into screen and has like a heart-to-heart with Mario or anything like that. It's very cameo-esque. So yeah. Outside of that, not really. I mean, I can fudge the numbers and say, like, Super Smash Brothers, he was a sticker or, you know, a spirit or whatever in Ultimate.
Yeah, Mii Fighter also.
It's a Mii Fighter in Wii U and the newest one. But outside of that, no. And you know what's the funniest thing? That this is very off topic, but I just want to just say this out loud because I had this thought yesterday. Square Enix owns Mallow, Gino, the Axum Rangers, all those characters that are not Nintendo property. Boshi. I think they own Boshi as well. So I just thought about the fact that, like, what's stopping Square Enix from literally making a Geno video game of their own? I don't think there's anything to stop them from doing that.
I think the internet would die if that happened. Genuinely, I think it would be like a Steve moment again. Well, maybe not, because it is like a bit in a bubble. But yeah, that would be amazing. What I hope is that after this, that we see a sequel. You know, using the same assets and stuff, but just a new story and maybe some new characters. That would be, I hope that people bought this game and the sales are showing that they're good.
Yeah, oh man, have a sequel for this. That would be incredible. There's just something that Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario has not been able to recapture in my mind, and I'd love to hear you say otherwise, but there's just a charm, there's a style, there's a writing style that's in this game that I just want to see more of. And, give me that sequel.
And I think now is a good time to go into the conclusion. Who is this for? Does it hold up today? You know, that sort of yada yada.
As far as whether or not it holds up, yes, absolutely. I think that there's a couple of things that maybe modern gaming could benefit the series for, like the platforming elements. Like maybe isometric platforming is not the best thing on the planet. That doesn't hold up astronomically well, but there's definitely ways around that. With a now fully 3D environment, you could change the camera angle just for those segments or something. But you know, those are just spitballing ideas. I know that the intent of this game was to make it as faithful as possible, and frankly, like, that's all we really needed for this game. I've always felt bad trying to recommend it to people because of how visually it ages year by year, but now that's not a problem. It's one of the most accurate styled remakes that I could personally ask for, and Mario RPG is probably the most deserving of that idea, in my opinion. I think it, like, trying to think of other games from PS1 era, Super Nintendo era, I do think that Super Mario RPG probably benefits the most from this idea that we're not going to change the gameplay, we're just going to try to make it look as it was originally intended, just HDified and with clean high poly models.
Yeah.
Big ups for that.
I think it's just perfect for both the newcomers and the veterans, because, you know, you see the complete glow up this game had, and it's so nice to see all the differences. But then for us peeps who haven't played the game, it's just a brilliant way to experience this masterpiece. So I think they hit two very nice audiences. And of course, like with other chats in this, like Mario RPG is a special course where it's now getting a remaster, but it's also just, this section is more to talk about, you know, does it still hold up just with all the gameplay and everything. And it's just, yeah, it completely does. It plays brilliantly. The music is great. The characters are wonderful. The writing, you know, they've updated it a bit here and there, but it's just, yeah, it's I really enjoyed this experience. So
that's so great to hear.
I think they completely nailed it.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where you just, at my age, you just don't know whether or not what you grew up with is as amazing as you think it is. But to hear that,
definitely, yeah,
from you, yeah, playing it for the first time, like, yes, oh, thank God. A great game is just a great game at the end of the day. And I mean, there's definitely going to be some games where, you know, you're looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, but I'm glad to hear that Super Mario RPG doesn't seem to be one of those games. It really does just stand on its own 2 feet. years later. That's great. Yes. Validated.
Awesome. But thank you so much for joining us, Shesez.
Of course.
By the way, you should check out his channel down in the description. He makes awesome videos where he looks at video games from out of bounds. It's really entertaining, and you should definitely go check it out. And also, what other people should we bring in for these types of videos? Maybe there's a creator that you think, oh, they would be perfect to talk about Pikmin, Portal, the Professor Layton series, Persona 5. Basically, any game that's on a Nintendo console is game here. Yeah, just let us know down in the comments below. And if you like this video, why don't you press that subscribe button for more Nintendo related content. All right, stay safe, play some Super Mario RPG, and we'll see you in the next one. Felix from Nintendo Life, out.
Shesez from Boundary Break, also out.
Hell yeah.